The British dream is to have a job and buy a house. That's it.
Large parts of the country and large parts of towns and cities up and down this country have a large influx of people from an area of the world where they don't necessarily, one, understand culture of the UK. I don't know if you could name what the culture of the UK is, but
why don't you?
Can't. Because I'm making a point, buddy. Which
well, I know, buddy, but what is the culture of the UK that you don't feel people are properly absorbing?
James, I'll be honest. What you're doing is you're asking me a question without listening to the question you already asked.
Oh, you just said that they're not properly observing the culture of the UK, and you said you may not know what it is, so I asked you to clarify for me.
I said they may not understand it.
Yeah, so what is it?
I can't be asked, buddy. Have a good day.
That went well, didn't it, buddy? Culture of the UK, they don't absorb the culture of the... What is it? Absolutely no idea, but I'm absolutely furious with the people that can't answer that question. Oh, whoops, I'm one of them.
Welcome back to the channel, folks. My name is Set. You are now watching Culture Crack. Yes, it's been a while since you've seen my face in this format, and since then, the beard has changed, the jaw has changed, and the world has changed. But one thing remains the same. It still stinks.
It could be the worst smell in the world, but if you don't know what it is, you will keep sniffing it until you figure it out. You see people go, What's that? Who's that?
Alright, so let's get the elephant in the room out of the way, right? As you can see, you might consider me a black person. And based on my accent, if you're watching in a different country, you might perceive me as a British black person. The taboo thing is, yes, we do exist. But the other taboo thing is, yes, we do exist, alright?
One of the things I really try to drive home to black British people is that we come from an extremely young culture here in Britain. Black British culture is extremely young. That means that every single thing that you do every single day is contributing to whatever the shape of black Britishness looks like. In 100, 200 years times when they think to themselves, what did the original black Britons think? What did the early black British people think? You guys are creating that every single day. You don't just create it, you also curate it, and you also produce it, and you distribute it. And I'm sorry that that's the position that we're in, but it is the position that we're in. Other communities get to make mistakes in ways that we don't get to make mistakes because there's so few of us and we're a very, very young culture, and the culture is literally being shaped around us. That being said, I really want you guys to think about all the things that you say, do, produce, and distribute in the name of black Britishness every single day, because you're shaping the culture.
Growing up, I've always been more in tune with the creative field, right? And in the creative field, there's two things they kind of steer you away from. One is having your own opinions and doing your own thing, and two is politics, right? I wonder why.
Englishman by DJ Whoever, yeah.
If you do not work in the music industry, if you are not an A&R, if you are not a talent manager, an artist manager, if you are not a label exec, if you are not a DJ, a radio presenter, you do not work in the music industry, shut up and enjoy the music.
Who's obviously auditioning. Unbeknownst to him, he is literally admitting that the degenerate and feral behaviours that we see projected about our young black youths, yeah, is not actually cultural as many people would claim it to be, but it's actually marketed to us. Listen up.
Let me tell you something, right? There is this concept where a label put money, time, effort into developing their artist in order for them to cross over into the mainstream and become a success because the artist is talented and gifted, but also because that is the very job of the music label. It is called marketing.
Therefore, we need to stop buying into it.
It's important that I give you this little background so you understand what the reality is on the ground, right? From a quote-unquote black Brit, right? I grew up in a council estate in a town, quite a notorious town in Britain. If you're up on your list of the worst places to live, our town is at the higher end of that list, right?
Wait, you're from Luton?
Wait, you're from Luton? Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. You know where it is?
Man, that place sucks.
I heard up there sucks, like success. Success up there.
Considering the economic realities, right, the material realities of how I grew up, it was quite impoverished. The school system was pretty shit. One thing I can give them is every year us millennials went up a year, they changed the system behind us, like, oh shit, these millennials keep putting out all the F-ups that we're doing, so we need to change the system. So props for them for doing that. Not quite sure how is it Gen Alpha is dealing with the system switch up, but yeah.
United Kingdom is completely cooked. 167,000 students failed their maths GCSE last year. That means 167,000 16-year-olds could not complete an exam where you were asked to write 0.7 as a fraction. What kind of imbecility? Brother, come on, man. What is the workforce gonna look like in 10 years? Are we just gonna have a bunch of dum-dums? What's going on?
Don't get me wrong. I love my country as much as the next man, right? But I only love it when I'm not interacting with the idiots in it. When you come from a town outside of the city, you're most likely considered country, right? So yeah, take this as a slight admission of me not knowing too much about much, right? The wise man knows he knows nothing at all, right? Not saying I'm wise either, but where we grew up, you're not supposed to know anything about economics, you're not supposed to know anything about politics, you're not supposed to know anything about just the way your country runs in general, right? We need you to be good worker bees and do exactly what we need you to do, right? You're not meant to excel too much and you're not meant to fail too much. We just need to keep you right in the middle so you can keep perpetuating this problem that we like to ignore called classism.
I can't wrap my head around the level of cognitive dissonance of what it means to be working class these days, so I was reading the book Know Your Place, and Dr. Shaheen in the book quotes a British social attribute survey that highlights 47% of Britons who would officially be classed as in middle class professional jobs identify as working class. And what's interesting is that a quarter of them will identify as working class, even if their parents did professional work also. And a couple of months ago, I was reading Black Girl No Magic, and it mentions how the New Statesman reported that more than 1 in 5 people earning between £75,000 and £100,000 identified as working class. And this is despite a salary of £75,000, putting you in the top 6% of taxpayers in 2019-2020. And it seems that there's different things at play here. The idea of individualism, and one seeing their achievements as a personal triumph, rather than owing to the class they're in or the privilege they have. And I guess it's also a part of British culture to a certain degree for one to play down their achievements. And equally you have those who genuinely grew up working class and financially are in a higher tax bracket, but would still identify as being working class. Maybe it's time for these terms to be redefined.
From my point of view as a millennial, it's pretty obvious that I spent most of my childhood and teen years and even early 20s running from this pretty obvious thing that's come knocking at my door as of recent years, right? And that is understanding politics. Now, let's be honest here. I don't know shit about shit, right? And I'm quite uninformed, but I'm trying to learn, right? So consider everything I'm going to say through that point of view. I'm just a commoner on the ground, a peasant, if you will, right? What do the peasants of Britain think, right? Just take it from that perspective.
What are you planning to vote for? Well, I've had a good look at what they've all got to say, and I'd rather vote for one of these sausage rolls, to tell you the truth. Than any of the candidates? Yeah. They're just all the same. They just tell you what you want to hear, just to get your vote. And you don't mean any of it. Never have. So the Reform candidate isn't tempting you? Good God, no. No, I'd rather hit myself on the head with a hammer than vote for him. I will serve crack before I serve my country. Russian aggression is obviously not good. Not a fan of imperialism in any form. I don't buy into the narrative that Russia will take over Europe and they'll just keep expanding westward. I just don't think that's going to happen. Not because I have faith in the morality of Putin specifically, but I don't think it's Britain's. It's within our national interest to put British soldiers in there. I think that the military-industrial complex is inherently predatory, especially upon young men. I don't agree with that at all.
Clearly, you wouldn't be signing up to go to Ukraine.
I don't think so. And why I say we've been trying to ignore it so much is it's obvious that the system is broken. And I know that's a very easy buzzword to throw around, the system is broken, but I'll put it to you like this, right? The British dream is to have a job and buy a house. That's it, right? Unlike the American dream built on freedom and the land of opportunity and stuff like that, no. The British dream is simply to enable the current system that's in play to stay working, which is classism, inequality and wealth, right? Buy your way into that system by becoming a landlord and maintain your position in that system by getting a decent job and then retiring at like 65 and fucking off to Benidorm, wherever the hell that is, right? That is the British dream, right? And it's an ugly thing. Now, don't get me wrong. It's understandable, right? That used to just be the standard means that was expected of everybody. You work for your adult life, right? And you put all that money into a house and you own a house and, you know, you look after yourself and your family, right? That used to be an expected standard. But because that expected standard is now so inflated, it seems almost unachievable. And for most people, it is unachievable, right?
Firstly, declare my interest as a landlord of private property.
For full transparency, I declare myself to be a landlord.
I declare an interest as a part owner of 2 rental properties. My lords, I declare my housing and property interest as on the register.
At this stage, I should redeclare my interest that my wife and I, almost for the last 30 years, by accident actually, are the landlords of 5 one-bedroom flats.
That I, as a landlord, have never refused a pet. I do need to declare an interest that I own one small apartment in the West Midlands which has been let out. I'd like to declare an interest on the register.
Just as a tidbit, my rent from 2020 to 2025 has almost doubled, right? Where is that ceiling? When will that ever end, right? That could go on forever, right? Long after I'm gone, the rent prices will still be rising. But will those rent prices rising allow people to actually get their foot on a property ladder? As we look around, we see so many people having 1 property, 2 property, 3 properties, 4 properties. Is a massive inequality of what's possible, right? Especially with that. I sometimes think it won't be long until we're a country walking around with £1,000 notes like other countries. No knock to them, but it's either they fix it or something like detrimental has to happen for the whole system to crash and we reboot and use a new currency, right? Not willing that on us at all, but it looks like the most likely scenario. But the reality is, a lot like the younger lot say, Britain is cooked. The UK is finished, right? It's really not, but the dramatic language really does highlight what life is like on the ground.
But when I say to you, this used to be one of the places in the Midlands to go on a Saturday night out, I'm not exaggerating. Now, yes, times have changed. Prices are higher. A lot of the youngsters don't drink as much. But this used to be this busy on a Sunday night when nothing was open. All the high street is now is betting shops, as you can see there, charity shops. Where's it all gone? I mean, is your town like this?
I shouldn't have come here, bruv. Like, looks that I'm getting, mate, they're all like, the way they're looking at me, I can tell that they're saying, like, bruv, you're an outsider, we're going to take your head clean off. Well, we would if you weren't such a geezer. Like, they can tell that I'm the governor and that, you know what I mean? So they're allowing me, but bruv, any of you lot try coming down here, mate, you lot's heads will be getting taken clean off, bruv. Can't even walk about with your phone out, mate. See, doing what I'm doing here with my phone, like, filming that. Bruv, if you lot even, like, reach for your pocket, your arm's coming off, mate. It's that bad round here, like, generally, but it's sad how that's become. Cause I wasn't like this when I was growing up, bruv. Speaking of phones, though, if you lot want to make money off yours, then don't forget to sign up to the course in my bio, yeah?
That's one of the many reasons why Britain is considered cooked. Moving on. As of 2024, over 4.6 million households in England rent from private landlords. Point is, owning property is marketed as the quote-unquote British dream, but the reality is it's become a debt trap for buyers and a wealth funnel for landlords. But guess who's footing the bill? The bottom of the pyramid. The idea that you're supposed to just work really hard and get your foot on the ladder is one thing in itself, right? But what is the actual reality of ownership? Well, you don't actually own a house in Britain, right? You buy a mortgage and then you work to pay that mortgage off for 35 years. Some of you do it really fast, right? And hats off to you, right? But that whole idea of just owning land, right? Or, well, truly in England, you don't really own the land, and that's another argument that like, the real educated people get into, right? Whether you think you do and you actually do is another matter, right? But just the idea that you own a property which you didn't build, right, is a myth.
I want to go back to a time when ordinary British families own their own home, and own a big chunk of the stock market. And then you have a situation where British families and British workers will have a bit of money in their pocket and they can spend money. And then people will want to invest in Britain because this is where the consumers are. This is where the activity is. You know, we're killing the consumer, and if you protect the consumer, then people want to invest in Britain because this is where the money will be.
But speaking of a myth, I think you can't blame us as a country for having this idea of the British dream, right? One thing in that is the actual history of the country, which I'll brush past a little bit, right? In the past, before England was unified, you're talking the AD times, 500s and 600s, whatever, right? The British Isles have always been groups of people, pockets of people, villages, communities, kingdoms, right? Actual kingdoms, right? There wasn't one unified kingdom. But anyway, amongst that British Isles, right? This is like brief history. Someone can brush up with this like much more on point than I can. I'm not a historian, I'm just a normal dude, right? Peasants weren't actually allowed to own property and own land. The land actually belonged to the Lord, ironically, right? Whoever the Lord of your region is, or your area, your countryside, or whatever, right? So that mindset of being peasants and being like basically just an oppressed people, right? Because you got to remember, before unification of England, right, there was so many different people doing their own thing. They had their own religions, they had their own cultures. They were coming from Europe, they were coming from other places, right? Let's not get into that either, right? Because there's someone that's gonna rile up the net like, oh, Wiley boy, right? Big up Wiley, right? But yeah, because of that history of just having a meager peasant's existence, as time has progressed, people's aspirations have been much lower, right? They've been much more curved off. It was simply just, we want to be able to own something, right? We want to be able to have a stake in this thing, right, called England or Britain or United Kingdom. And that's kind of where the bubble is, right, at this point in 2025. Still peasants, still basically subjects, but we're subjects with the illusion of having a share in the kingdom kind of thing, right? When truly we don't. It's so deep in England, like we don't even have a codified constitution, right? That's how clever our country is when it comes to linguistics and governing, right? Never let them hold you to one thing kind of thing. Like anytime they think they've got you, boom, just like, you know? That's how clever the system is at its base, right? And that's very surface level shit, again, from a nobody, yeah? But that aside, the British dream is failing, right? And it's failing fast. And the reason why we're able to see it's failing fast is because social media, right? And the interactions with other people on a day-to-day. Lots of people are disillusioned.
Just pay attention, because I really think some people in this country have not got a clue how bad some people have it. Well, the UK's average national salary is £37,000, 430 a year. That gives you about £2,400 a month to live on. By ONS and .gov UK statistics, monthly bills for an average household rent or mortgage are £1,341 for renters outside London, and way more expensive inside London, and a mortgage at £1,056 for a typical home loan. If you rent, you are left with £252 a month at the end of the month. If you own a home, you have £537 left. What about those on minimum wage? As a full-time worker, 40 hours a week, who earn £25,400 a year. They will take home £1,700 a month. But the average monthly bills for a renter are £2,148. That means they're £448 short every single month just to survive. A YouGov survey that was done last year suggested that 45% of the UK earns less than £30,000 a year, which means that at least 45% of the nation, on average, at the end of the month, cannot afford to pay their bills.
Again, I'm not part of no ideologies, I'm not even like educated on all this. It's just obvious on the ground, right? That we oppress each other.
I look down on them because I'm from a more advanced society.
I'm Renaissance man. I look up to him because he is on average 4 inches taller than I am. But I look down on him because he is a smelly, ignorant serf. I'm medieval man. I look up to them because I'm a smelly, ignorant serf. I live in a one-room hovel made of straw and manure.
I live in a new Barrett's estate, so I envy him. However, I do have hot and cold running water, a car, a Yamaha organ, a TV, and a new video. Although I don't know how to whip.
I have cold running water, a map of the world which includes the Americas, a telescope, and the collected works of Homer in 39 weekly parts. I have a pig. Although I don't know how to work it. I am so ignorant, I think the sun goes to bed at night. I think the sun revolves around the earth.
I think the sun shines out of my trousers.
I think there's a terrible crabs in a bucket mentality here in the UK. And I think the biggest reason is that a lot of people do want to better their lives and they want better for themselves and their families, but they just don't know how to go about it. So because they don't have the minerals to do it, they see other people doing well and they immediately start hating on them. When deep down, all they want is what the other people have.
We talked about this on a live stream the other day, what it means to be humble and where the idea comes from and all of these kinds of things. Who does it really benefit for you to be humble or humbled, right? And we have that very much embedded in our culture. Humbling people instead of being the strong who lifts people up with us, right? People like to push people down. You know, like the guy that knocks down all the tall buildings so he can have the tallest building. That is very much what British culture is like, right? But it's paved over with the veneer of success, right? But the reality is everything that appears as a signifier to success is financed, right? More debt, right? More credit, right? So it's very much a deep twisted illusion going down on the ground, and more people are becoming disillusioned with this, right?
Having a financed car is one of the biggest reasons why people in the UK are struggling financially. Average monthly car finance payment is nearly £400 a month. £400.
If you're using buy now, pay later, you've got to stop. Now you might be thinking, I mean, why have you always got to throw a span in the works? What is wrong with buy now, pay later? You get the item you want, it's interest free, and you get to break up the payment. How could that be so bad? Well, you have to understand, no company will give you money unless it benefits them. And what is the benefit for these companies? Now they know the first time you use it, the second time or the third time, that you will be using it to purchase items you would have purchased anyway and paid for upfront. But by the fourth or fifth time that you are now using it, you're using it to purchase items that you wouldn't ordinarily need or want or be able to afford. But you justify it in your head saying, it's not like I have to pay for it today anyway, I can pay for it over 3 payments, it'll mean nothing to me. But what happens is that 25% of buy now, pay later users are missing payments. 32% of buy now, pay later users are struggling to keep up with payments. Don't get yourself stuck in this trap, getting sold by the marketing ploy. It goes back to the fundamentals. If you can't afford to pay for it cash, you can't afford the item. And if you can't afford to pay for it upfront, then just pay for it upfront and keep yourself out of this trap.
The UK household debt reached 1.8 trillion in 2024. Buy now, pay later schemes have soared by 40% since 2022, and there's no signs of it slowing down. The reality is, from phones to funerals, debt is normalised. Wealth is often just well-managed credit with a smile.
Citizens Advice found that 1 in 12 people turn to buy now, pay later to cover basic costs such as food and toiletries in the last 6 months, but some people rely on it more than others. The charity discovered that young people, those in debt and those claiming universal credit are at least twice as likely to have used buy now, pay later for essentials compared to the general population. Now, Citizens Advice is particularly worried about the rise of firms offering buy now, pay later for food shopping in the past few years and has been calling for urgent regulation of the sector. This includes things like consistent market-wide affordability checks and for buy now, pay later firms to make the consequences clearer for customers if things do go wrong. Buy now, pay later is a double-edged sword. It can be useful if you know exactly what you're getting into and you understand what you're getting into, but if you're using it out of desperation, you're probably not likely to be able to repay. And particularly now, as living costs spiral, there is a fear that people in desperate situations will see this unregulated form of credit as the answer.
Unemploymentism, if you let TikToks tell it, or the reality of benefits being under siege.
Oh, you got all that on universal credit. I'll tell you what it is, yeah? It's a little something called being bare smart, Famalamji, yeah? Basically, don't be trying to get a job when you're on universal credit. Claim the money and just sell white and brown like me.
As we all know, the current government and the DWP have faced criticism over increasing sanctions, while universal credit claimants rose during the cost of living. So there's a reason people are on universal credits, evidently. Not to mention NHS cuts, while waiting lists hit a record of 7.6 million in 2023, with many forced to go private. Hence why you got people thinking Reform's idea of privatising NHS is a good idea. But it's not.
I thought reform was better than that.
Do you think that wealthy people deserve to get better healthcare than everyone else?
No. No.
Oh no.
Everyone should be treated the same.
Do you think people should have to pay to see a doctor?
No. No, definitely not.
If you ain't got the money, what do you do?
I don't know what would happen to me, to be fair, because I've got a lot of illnesses.
Do you think we should be moving towards an American healthcare system where people have got private insurance?
No.
No. No. Oh no, we can't afford it.
I mean, if you can afford to pay for £2,000 for an injection, that's up to you.
Because there'd be a hell of a lot of people that just die, won't they?
Who do you think disagrees with you?
Tories, people that earn a lot more.
The rich people.
I don't know if it disagrees with me or not, to be honest.
So, unfortunately, the political party that represents you in this area, that's the Reform Party. They disagree with you.
Enough said. So they actually said that?
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have to move to an insurance-based system of healthcare.
God. I thought reform was better than that.
So does it surprise you that the Reform Party think like that?
To be honest, yeah. I thought the Reform Party were more on our side.
Yes, it does surprise me, yeah.
Reform, to me, is for the British people, but these sort of things, that's definitely not for the British people.
They don't care about us. All they care about is money in their pockets.
How do you feel about that?
I feel angry. They put out a front, but they go in through the back door, do completely opposite of what they stand for.
God.
I'm so fed up of hearing politicians make out that it's ideology that is making people oppose NHS privatisation. There is mounting evidence that NHS privatisation creates harm. In 2022, an analysis came out from the University of Oxford. They'd been looking into outsourced healthcare services in the NHS, which means that external organisations are running services, including major private companies, and they looked at the period between 2013 and 2020. Here's a line from their findings. Private sector outsourcing corresponded with significantly increased rates of treatable mortality. That's avoidable deaths, by the way, potentially as a result of decline in the quality of healthcare services. Does that sound like something that you should be continuing with or indeed expanding within the NHS right now? And then there was another analysis that came out this year in 2024, again from the University of Oxford, and this time they've been looking at lots of different healthcare systems in high-income countries, and they have a quote that says, increases in privatisation generally corresponded with worse quality of care.
Speaking of reform, the party is evidently about to be used as a political pawn, just like how UKIP was used during Brexit. If we're being honest, our country is basically run on a two-party system. It's just the same people who changed the Rosette, if that's how you want to put it. After Conservatives, or as we like to call them in the UK, Tories, had their nice little run for however many years and done what they done, Labour come back in power again with Keir Starmer and kicked them out. So the clever trick that this is like kind of highlights the insidious nature of Britain and how it's good for us as people to act like we're dumber than we really are.
I order you to be quiet.
Who the hell does he think he is?
I'm your king.
Well, I didn't vote for you.
You don't vote for kings.
Well, how did you become king then?
The Lady of the Lake held aloft Excalibur from the bosom of the water, signifying by divine providence that I, Arthur, was to carry Excalibur. That is why I'm your king. Listen, strange women lying in ponds, distributing swords is no basis for a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony. Be quiet. But you can't expect to wield supreme executive power just because some watery tart threw a sword at you. Shut up. I mean, if I went round saying I was an emperor, just because some moistened bint had lobbed a scimitar at me, they put me away. Shut up. Will you shut up? Oh, now we see the violence inherent in the system. Shut up. Oh, come and see the violence inherent in the system. Help, help. I'm being repressed. Bloody peasant. Oh, what a giveaway. Do you hear that? Do you hear that, eh? That's what I'm on about. Do you see him repressing me?
The idea of diversity as a PR strategy. Why else would the face of the Tories be a black woman? Tokenism over transformation. Diversity in power doesn't mean power for diverse people. To give context, Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch are often used as rhetorical shields against accusations of racism and classism. It's clever, but just not clever enough.
Over the weekend, I suggested to the Prime Minister that he cut the aid budget, and I'm pleased that he accepted my advice.
There is a unique kind of pain that comes when the very people you sold yourself to remind you that you were never one of them.
She didn't feature in my thinking at all.
When you build a house on borrowed land, the owner can evict you at any given time. Starmer didn't just ignore her, he erased her. The logic behind Starmer's statement is rooted in a rhetorical device called a fortiori reasoning. Now, if he didn't even think about her, how could he take her advice seriously? If someone failed to notice something as large and conspicuous as a trailer truck, it follows that they definitely didn't notice the smaller, less conspicuous detail, in this case the driver. That was a public diminishing of relevance designed to make her politically invisible, just like the driver.
She's appointed herself, I think, savior of the Western civilization. It's a desperate search for relevance.
This is what we call exaggeration as dismissal. Instead of debating her point, Starmer framed her as delusional. Someone appointing herself as the savior of the Western civilization. Like, seriously. It's not just an insult, it's a psychological warfare. It makes her look desperate for importance. It weakens her credibility and ensures that no one in that house or watching takes her seriously. A desperate search for relevance, that's the real dagger. Because, I mean, it means Britain never saw her as central to their politics. She wasn't, or she isn't, a key player, just a convenient voice when needed. a political weapon against her own people.
Mr. Speaker, I understand she likes straight talking. She's talking absolute nonsense.
In order to give rise to the politics of Nigel Farage and reform, you have to do something about the two-party system to give space for this third potential party to come into power. And what is the best way to do that? Put a black woman as the head of the Conservative Party. What Conservative is going to vote for that, right? This is Britain, right? As much as we pretend to not be racist, Britain is racist in its core and in its day-to-day life, right? What it's looking like in the climate, and again, I don't know much about politics at all. I'm an unlearned, right? Consider me that and take my word for it. It's looking more like Nigel Farage and reform are being used as a pawn in terms of political spin, right? Nigel Farage has always been a polarizing character. He has a very checkered history, put it that way, right? But what we're seeing on the ground is the overlords of the idea of reform have swept up a lot of the, I'm not going to call them dumb, because who am I to say anyone's dumb? I'm probably considered dumb in many aspects of life too. But it's swept up the uninformed and the vulnerable the most, right? And keeping them uninformed on the basis of immigration, right?
So on the very same day that Keir Starmer tells us he's going to stop people coming into Britain, we saw this on the French beaches this morning. Yeah, these young men, undocumented, are coming into our country, and this just a few days after an Iranian asylum seeker was arrested on suspicion of terrorism. These people should not be coming into our country. These people must never be allowed to stay in our country, and yet Tories and Labour, too gutless, too weak to deal with it, vote for reform, and we'll send them back to where they came from.
Every area of the immigration system, work, family and study, will be tightened up so we have more control. Skill requirements raised to degree level. English language requirements across all routes, including for dependents. The time it takes to acquire settled status extended from 5 years to 10. And enforcement tougher than ever, because fair rules must be followed.
Are you refugees?
Yeah, maybe Ukrainians, they don't want to have this comparison with other nationalities who had to flee from the war. Maybe it's somehow humiliating for them. Yeah, I came here as a refugee, but I don't have this refugee status because I've got the residence permit. So I'm a resident of the UK. So I'm just like a normal person with all rights.
So wouldn't it be better for the British government to kind of change instead of word using refugee to another thing? Because UK gives Ukrainians, BPR, gives all the kind of a right to work. Most people that come in, even immigrants or refugees, when they come in, they don't have right to work unless they go through the process.
Yes, it's different. It's different. Absolutely different. So Ukrainians, we have like better situations, better conditions, and therefore other nationalities don't like Ukrainians because when we came here, we got everything.
Nicely treated, basically.
Yes.
We risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together.
They found themselves made strangers in their own country.
The Home Secretary explained why. In the introduction of this white paper, the language of Enoch Powell was used by the Prime Minister. There's been no speaking up about the enormous value of migration to this country that's kept our NHS running, our education service running, and so much more, and that there are already 130,000 vacancies in the care sector. Does anything in her white paper do anything to improve community relations or deal with the now labour shortage within the NHS and the care service? Or is it all about trying to please these people who unfortunately sit in front of me?
Should immigrants learn English? Of course. I don't want to be surrounded by people speaking a foreign language. Where do you live? Spain. And do you speak Spanish? Oh, no. Immigrants should go home. Where do you live? In a care home. Who looks after you? No one. They've all gone home. We should look after our own. Veterans? No, not them. Hungry children? Nah. Well, I've got a law degree, but I'm happy to go and pick fruit, wipe bums, do my bit.
As a country, we've already got hella immigration laws, right? People think that immigrants are just hopping over a fence and they just decided on, right? Now, like, an illegal immigrant can't get universal credit, right? They have very minimal, they literally, it's like when you see Americans and the Mexican issue, right? They literally try their best to avoid any interaction with public services like the NHS and the police and anything like that, right? Because we literally have laws against it, right? So that's one thing to decide, right? But because a lot of these people are uninformed, they have like an overarching consensus which comes from their own biases and their discontent, which you can't be mad at them about. But the thing is, if the right person doesn't come and knock your door and explain it to you in a way you understand, you're just going to go for the nearest low-hanging fruit, right? This looks like it makes sense to me, right? Yes, because it's the lowest common denominator, so it's easier for you to be attracted to it.
For more than a week, riots breaking out in city after city. Cars torched in northeast England. Fires raging in Belfast in Northern Ireland. This hotel, used to house asylum seekers, set ablaze. More than 400 arrests so far, including nearly 150 just this weekend. Police warning the number will rise.
I can confirm today we have seen at least 12 of our officers injured, with items such as brick fence posts, branches and other missiles thrown at them.
Authorities blaming much of the violence on far-right extremist groups, some with neo-Nazi ties. Amid the chaos, counter-protesters pushing back. Why is this happening? The immediate trigger, the murder last week of 3 young girls in a horrific stabbing spree. In the hours after, far-right provocateurs posted disinformation on social media, claiming the suspect was an immigrant in the UK illegally. It went viral, but it wasn't true. Authorities say the suspect is a 17-year-old born in the UK.
And social media clearly put rocket boosters under some of the organisation, the inflaming of tensions, and also the misinformation. So we will be pursuing this with the social media companies.
But immigration has increasingly been a flashpoint in the UK.
How do you feel as a Brit when you see what's taking place in this country?
Ashamed. Ultimately, I think it's the one word, ashamed.
Yeah.
It's not how 99% of Britain feel. I think it's just a really small minority.
Tonight, with the cleanup underway, painful questions about what kind of a nation the UK wants to be.
All that to say, what it's looking like in the current climate is that if Reform doesn't become the competing party against Labour, which is quite unlikely to ever really happen, it's more than likely to be used as a pawn to position the Conservatives or Tories to like eat this party or merge this party into their party kind of thing. So which brings them like it's like let's oust the leader kind of thing, right? And then bring back the old ways of doing things. It's very clever, right? But in terms of the Britain First idea, we've got history to suggest that this doesn't work very well, right? Isolating yourself as a country is never a good idea, especially when you're an island, right? But that is all to the side, right? Who gives a shit about my political analysis, right? I don't even give a shit about my political analysis, in all honesty. But that's one of the things that have us in a state of discontent, but going about it in the wrong way, right? Again, I'm not very educated on the matters either. I don't advocate for any political party, and I definitely don't even have a stake in stopping any other political party because I'm still a learner, right?
Let's just bring you a bit of breaking news from the courts. Right-wing extremists Christopher Ringrose, Marco Pizzetto and Brogan Stewart have all been found guilty at Sheffield Crown Court of planning terrorist attacks on mosques and synagogues. That's just come into us now from the court. We'll bring you more on that.
Far-right extremists convicted of terror offences after stockpiling weapons and plotting attacks. 3. Far-right extremists Brogan Stewart from West Yorkshire, Christopher Ringrose from Staffordshire, and Marco Pizzetto from Derbyshire have been found guilty of terrorism offences at Sheffield Crown Court. The group, which glorified Nazi ideology, had planned violent attacks, including one targeting a mosque. The court heard that Stewart discussed torturing a Muslim leader, while more than 200 weapons were discovered across their homes. Ringrose had also started constructing a semi-automatic firearm using a 3D printer, which police described as potentially deadly.
So, on the edges or the fringes of society, which are becoming more and more mainstream as the days go by, we've got these people which we consider to be religious nuts, right? Or religious nationalists.
I think a lot of very well-meaning, lovely liberal people were too complacent in Britain. They didn't feel the need to preserve our culture, our Christian culture. And now they look around, and shock horror, they don't recognise the local area. They don't like the rising crime. They don't like their women and daughters not feeling safe. They don't like the direction of travel in this country. And the fact is, going to church, turning up, being present, is a show of strength and force. And I think we are seeing a surge in church numbers, in Christianity and in baptisms, not just because people want to find God in difficult and uncertain times, which I think, by the way, is a big part of it, but because people, frankly, want their country back.
To put this quite simply, with the rise of the religious nationalism in Britain, this religion against that religion, it highlights a very obvious point to someone like myself who considers myself not believing in any of these things, right? You have the manipulators and the manipulatees. However, politically, you do have to acknowledge the idea of England being unified by a Christian king does technically make it a Christian country. But that doesn't mean the inhabitants of the British Isles at the time when it was unified agreed to Christianity. Much like in Rome, when the state decided to come closer with the Pope and all them and made Christianity the state religion, it doesn't mean the Romans agreed to that either, right? The political power, the state and religion have always been side by side. So once it invades most of Western Europe, it doesn't do so through the power of reason. It does it through the power of force, by the sword, right? A lot of Brits in 2025 are very much out of touch with their actual histories as individuals, and they've got this idea which basically, right, so I'll put it like this: it's easier to control a group of people when you control their identity.
So you might have thought that that secularization would proceed and continue at pace in Britain, and that we would become a more secular country, a more liberal country, a more enlightened country, and all the rest of it. And I think partly as a result of the fact that that hasn't happened, and people are feeling a serious crisis of meanings, it's no wonder that people are, young men in particular, are beginning to reach for these much stronger, thicker forms of identity, which doesn't just say, look, you're free to do whatever you want, so long as it's within the bounds of the law, but actually makes a strong claim on you and says, look, you are this, you are a creature of God, you have duties to perform as well as powers to exercise. And so this can be very, actually very meaningful to people, because rather than being told they can do what they want, they're actually being told to do something. They're being given something more than liberty, they're being given order and authority, which has been lacking. Another reason why I think think that church attendance is likely to be up among young men in particular is because there's a sense that there is a rival challenge to our civilization, most salient in the form of Islam, which makes no bones whatsoever about making those strong claims about man and his relationship to God, and is having immense social consequences in our society. So in many ways, I think the fact that church attendance is up among young men can be, and young people in general, but particularly among young men, can be viewed as an immune response to a very serious civilizational challenge, which, if allowed to win, will make any form of Christian life completely impossible in the West.
If you tell these people you are just flat white, right, and by default, because you're flat white and British, you are Christian, it's easier to control them, right? This explains a lot of the problems happening in history, right?
Remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up and they were like, damn, we gotta figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another or they're gonna rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are gonna figure out they're all getting played by these rich people, right? So ultimately the rich figure out they gotta come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you, they sort of share some of the customs and the culture, so they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're gonna let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude, no more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're gonna take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown.
We like to look at Christianity and Islam and Judaism like that old Nazi granddad, right? Look at granddad. He wouldn't hurt a fly. Like, he's got nothing but good morals to offer us, right? He's a good guy. No. You guys didn't see granddad when he was in his early 20s and his early 30s, right? You wouldn't want to know him.
One saying I've heard a lot on this app when people are discussing Christianity's connection to racism and intolerance is there's no hate like Christian love. And if we look at the history of European colonization and their interactions with indigenous people, we can add another phrase. There's no violence like Christian peace. After Columbus made his first voyage to the Americas in 1492, the following year, Pope Alexander issued the Doctrine of Discovery, which gave Spain exclusive ownership rights over the lands that Columbus discovered. The Pope declared that any land not inhabited by Christians was available to be discovered, claimed, and exploited by Christian rulers. He said that barbarous nations must be overthrown and brought to the faith. Therefore, the Pope was giving away land that he had never been to and was already occupied by tens of millions of people. But since they weren't Christians, the Pope believed that they had no right to claim any land as their own. By 1513, all Spanish conquistadors were mandated to read out a document to any indigenous people they proposed to conquer and enslave. The document required indigenous people to acknowledge the church as the ruler and superior of the whole world, and said that if they converted to Christianity, we shall receive you in all love and charity. However, if they refused to convert, these conquerors said, I certify that with God's help, I will advance powerfully against you and make war on you wherever and however I am able, and will subject you to the control and obedience of the church and of their majesties, and take your women and children to be slaves. And as such, I will sell and dispose of them as their majesties may order, and I will take your possessions and do all the harm and damage that I can. When the Dominican friar Bartolomé de las Casas wrote a book in 1542 about the violence he'd seen the Spanish inflict on the indigenous people in the Americas, he made sure to emphasize that these were Christians who were acting like devils. He wrote that, at a conservative estimate, the despotic and diabolical behavior of the Christians has, over the last 40 years, led to the unjust and totally unwarranted deaths of more than 12 million souls, women and children among them. When French invaders began taking over indigenous land in North America and spreading deadly diseases that wiped out entire native communities, one French settler wrote, it appears visibly that God wishes that they yield their place to new peoples. When the English Puritan John Winthrop arrived in New England in 1630, he said, the natives, they are all dead of smallpox. The Lord hath cleared our title to what we possess. In his journal, the New England governor William Bradford wrote, the plague is from the good hand of God, which favored our beginnings by sweeping away great multitudes of the natives that he might make room for us. The epidemic left the land without any people to disturb our free and peaceable possession thereof, from which we may justly conclude that God made the way to effect his work. When Americans began invading the West, they used Christianity to justify their right to take indigenous land. In 1845, the writer John O'Sullivan coined the phrase manifest destiny to describe the idea that God wanted white Americans to take control over indigenous territory. He said that Americans were on a divine mission to possess the whole of the continent, which Providence has given for the development of the great experiment of liberty. To justify stealing indigenous land, all Americans had to do was turn to their Bible.
So, The reason I say that is on the British Isles you had Celtics, you had Anglo-Saxons, you had Romans. I can't give all of the ethnicities, but basically the original inhabitants of Britain, right, the Isles, right, have traded in their identities for flat whiteness and for Christianity.
A 2016 study by Schiffels and colleagues looked at DNA of 10 Anglo-Saxon skeletons and found that on average, modern English people took about 38% of their DNA from such people. A forthcoming study from the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History may yield different results. In a talk on their yet-to-be-published findings, they revealed that they had genome sequences from over 80 Anglo-Saxon skeletons, and when compared to the numerous samples of earlier British skeletons acquired from other studies, they found that approximately 80% of British ancestry was replaced in England during the time of the Anglo-Saxon invasions.
And a lot of European people, specifically Western European people, are coming back to their roots, right? Thank God that they had like great-great-grandmas and great-great-granddads who kept all of this information about their original beliefs and their identity kind of secret from the people that are considered the invaders, being that the Christians, right? Because now they're able to look back and say, actually, my great-great-granddad believed in this and he followed this and we was this tribe, right? And more of them are becoming conscious to this fact, right? Which poses quite a big threat to the idea of Christian nationalism.
What is Britain's pagan heritage and why does it matter? And the first can be answered very speedily, that it is one of the richest and finest inheritances of the pre-Christian religions of Europe in the entire continent. From the earlier Old Stone Age or Paleolithic, we have the so-called Red Lady of Paviland, a burial perhaps 34,000 years old from a cave in South Wales. From the later Paleolithic, we have the carvings in the caves of Creswell Crags in the North Midlands, some of the finest from the period in the world. From the Middle Stone Age or Mesolithic, we have settlements and campsites with evidence of ritual, above all Star Carr in Yorkshire, one of the finest such places in Europe. From the New Stone Age or Neolithic, the monuments begin. First of all, the chambered tomb shrines we call long barrows or dolmens, and then the stone circles, which carry on being built into the Bronze Age. From the Iron Age, we have the enormous structures known as hill forts, formerly thought to be the equivalent of medieval castles as the strongholds of chiefs, but now realised to be communal gathering places for many purposes, including, and centrally, religion. So they are mighty ritual monuments. And then we reach the dawn of history, with the coming of the Romans. And the Romans not only bring in their own goddesses and gods from Italy, but they also reveal those of the native Iron Age British by giving them inscriptions and sculptures for the first time. And from every corner of the vast Roman Empire, different peoples arrive in Britain, bringing their pantheons of deities with them, from as far as Syria, Egypt, Africa, and all over northern Europe. And when the Romans convert to Christianity and they pull out, the Anglo-Saxons, the early English, come in, bringing a completely new set of deities, like Woden and Thunor, Tiw and Frigg. Then the Anglo-Saxons convert to Christianity just in time for the Vikings to turn up, with virtually the only group of Western and Central European goddesses and gods we haven't seen yet in Britain. And only when the Vikings turn Christian after 100 to 200 years is the whole marvellous pageant complete.
Besides the Christian nationalism, you've got the Islamic warfare kind of thing happening as well. It's like, oh, because we're a Christian country, we don't want these Islamic people here. But the irony is, Christianity is a Middle Eastern religion too, right? So it's that identity is just as much foreign to you as an original native of the British Isles as Islam is, right? This is the trap. This is what I'm saying, right?
The United Kingdom is no longer a Christian country. Only 46.2% of people polled describe themselves as Christian. People are absolutely apoplectic about this. Of course, they think that it's the end of this as a nation. It doesn't bother me at all. It never meant anything to be about a Christian nation anyway. I mean, as a former atheist, I understand. You see, people think it's other religions coming in. No. About 37% of people say they have no religion or are atheist. That's where the big change is happening. And I said, I'm a former atheist. I understand that. I know where they're coming from. And as someone who is so sick to the teeth of what passes as Christian, I also understand it.
More people are becoming aware of this, but it's very hard, right? If you go onto TikTok, you can see the religious warfare in real time. Impeccable amounts of Christian propaganda underneath every comment section. Things that have nothing to do with any religion at all. Jesus died for your sins. Like all of this is a really concerted effort to keep pushing this narrative, right? And it's dangerous because, like I just said, if you take away a person's identity and make them swap their identity for something else, you now control the narrative of their identity, right? They can't tell you who they are. You tell them who they are, you know? You're Christian, you're white. No, the actual reality is you're from a specific place in Europe, from a specific time where your family migrated or immigrated, right? You had this belief in paganism or pantheism, however you want to put it, right? And you're from a specific place and you're a specific people. But the amalgamation of creating an otherness has done them in, right? And that's why it spread so badly across the world in terms of colonialism, because colonialism is just the is just the outcome of that exact same thing, right?
Britain is a small island with limited resources, and they had visions of grandeur. Colonialism was about wealth extraction, racial domination, and military control. There were two types of colonies, the ones that got whitened and the ones that got exploited. In settler colonies, British settlers and European settlers took over, and in some places wiped out indigenous populations completely. In the best cases, the settlers claimed the land and the native populations got pushed into the background as they made the lands British, and Westernism emerged. But extraction colonies were never meant to be British. This is where they stole resources and used cheap labour to control trade. When indigenous populations would resist, they massacred them in their millions. They used divide and conquer tactics and puppet leaders to maintain control. They would play mind games with populations, sometimes using them to fight their battles and sometimes crushing them themselves directly, greasing the wheels and using local elites who could be bought cheap to divide and rule. This has kept colonies weak and dependent on the West ever since. The British didn't rely on brute force to control territories. They would manipulate existing power structures, turning tribes, religions, everybody against each other so that no one noticed what they were doing.
If your identity has been deleted and you've accepted a new identity, you have nothing else to do but to try and push it forward because you've lost your own identity yourself, right? So when you see them going over to the New World and doing what they do to the Indians, going over to Africa and doing what they do to the Africans, it's by extension the same kind of thing, right? It's not their fault, but it is their responsibility, right? Forget all that. The rise of religious propaganda and warfare has many people under this idea of, oh, there's a civil war coming, right? But what civil war, right? It's a religious war, if you want to be honest, and at the roots of the religious war is the same problem of classism, realistically, right? But I'm not even that way inclined politically, but what I will say is it's becoming more and more prevalent and more dangerous. And the problem is religion has never ever spread on pure reasoning, rational reasoning. There is nothing rational or natural about the three Abrahamic religions, right? Paganism, pantheism, all of that is far more natural than a guy alike. Anyways, before we get into a discriminatory kind of zone here, right? All that is to say, this idea of beliefs is what keeps people emotional and easier to control, right? Everybody wants a civil war, but they can't convince their friend to throw the first rock, right?
The UK is on the brink of civil war within 5 years. Professor David Betts has stated that the UK is explosively configured for mass unrest. Now remember, this isn't just some crazy conspiracy theorist. This is a top professor and a government advisor. Betts also warns that if things do not change in the UK, that this will happen within the next 5 years, and genuinely, I think it's getting close. So could it be that our government don't want to defend the borders? Is it the fact that our pride and joy in the NHS is falling apart? You can't get a doctor's appointment. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I'm supposed to be seeing a nurse every 3 to 6 months. I haven't seen one in like 2 years. Is it the fact that young people can't afford to get on the property ladder anymore and social housing is being used up by illegal immigrants? Now, could that be the reason we're so close to a civil unrest?
Fast forward to the Civil War era. Here's the trick. If I'm rich and I want to go to war to protect my ownership in other human beings, my property, but you're poor and you don't own any enslaved people, why the hell would you go fight to protect my stuff? Because I'm a rich person. I'm not going to fight. Rich people don't go to war. Right? Rich people get poor people to go to war for them, whether it's in 1860 or whether it's during the 1960s or whether it's today, right? Rich folks get doctors to write notes for them that say that they have heel spurs and that's why they can't go to Vietnam. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you can Google that shit because he's sitting in the White House right now, right? Oh, I can't go fight. I have heel spurs. Send some poor kids to do that for me, please, right? So that's been a long-standing tradition. So the rich have to figure out a way to convince the poor to go fight for them. But that's a hard thing. That's like a hard sell, right? Like how the hell, why would you do that? Why would you go fight to protect my property rights when you don't own anything? The only way you would do it is if that rich person comes to you and says, hey, listen, you gotta go fight because we gotta maintain our way of life because if these people get free, they're gonna take your jobs. No, fool, they already got your job. That's how it works, right? Because if I'm white and I gotta charge you $1 a day to work on the farm, but you can get a black person to do it for nothing because you own them, guess who got the job? Free got the job, right? So in a sense, poor white folks would have been better off joining with black folks to overthrow the slave system. That would have raised the wage floor of all working people. But they got tricked by rich white men telling them that their enemies were black and brown. Fast forward to the 1930s. And you have white labor leaders. They're not even the elite, right? The labor leaders are not the elite, but they're the elite within the labor movement. And even they had fallen for it at this point. So they didn't want to integrate their unions. And they would say things like, well, we can't have black people and Mexicans and Chinese folks in our unions because if we do that, it's going to reduce the professionalism of our craft. We have to maintain the integrity of our profession. No, fool, you need more people in the damn union is what you need. And if you don't let those folks in, guess what happens? When you go out on strike, who is the boss going to use to replace you? They're going to replace you with the very same black and brown folks that you didn't want to work next to. Right? And so at the end of and then you're going to blame them for taking your job rather than the white rich dude for giving it to them, right? Divide and conquer, telling not rich white folks that their enemies are black and brown. And now we fast forward to the president. We got the president of the United States becoming president on the basis of that same rhetoric, telling not rich white folks that the reason they don't have a job is because Mexicans took them.
And back to that problem, like I said earlier on, with the subtle racism, but the real underlying problem of racism in the country is that a lot of people have been fed this narrative and perpetuating it on places like TikTok of, oh, why do you care about race so much? Even if you actually don't care about race, right? Just surely if we stop talking about it, it will go away.
I suppose all we need to do is stop talking about black history and start talking about human history. Stop saying slavery is a white problem and start saying it's a human problem. And stop saying racism is a white problem and start saying it's an international problem. It could be as easy as that to stop racism. Just stop talking about it. But some people need racism. It's so ingrained in them that they don't know how to be anything else. Some people need an excuse to not have to work hard, and when things go wrong, they have someone to blame.
Rob, if you just stop talking about this, if everybody would just stop talking about it, racism would go away. You keep bringing it up. It sounds like a toddler. It sounds like somebody hiding in a closet. My black friends aren't having it go away because nobody's talking about it. The more people that talk about it, the better. There need to be 10,000 of me and 10,000 of you saying it, making sure that we keep talking about it, because it's been invisible for 400 years and it's time to bring it out. And let's look.
So I put it to you like this, right? When have you ever had an illness that if you just ignored it, it went away? Name me a time, right? That's simply just not how things work realistically.
Do you think teachers genuinely respect black culture?
Respect? If there's anything, it's a healthy disrespect for black culture. And they just don't regard it at all. That's how they just show it. They just cast it aside. It's as if you're worse than a second-class citizen. You're just nothing, you know. You wouldn't be there. You wouldn't have what you had if it hadn't been for the white man's kindness towards you, you know. And the black kid is faced with things such as, you know, the empire, and all these kind of forces come rushing at him in history. They just don't know anything about themselves.
If a black man and a white man went for the same job, it's most likely that the white man will get the job because of his skin.
Do you think it's a good idea to teach black history?
Yeah, I think it's imperative that you should.
Why?
Because it will get rid of a lot of the ignorance surrounding black people where they came from. And it will make black people think that, well, for them to succeed, that tell them that they've got history, that they've got heritage, so they don't have to adopt white values and white ideals.
Rather than educating ourselves on our differences, right, and accepting each other for who we are, we like to pretend to do the same thing I just said about flat whiteness, right? We're all the same, right? No, we're not all the same, right? And because we're not all the same, that makes us better for each other, right? We become our puzzle pieces. But if we're all the same, right, there's nothing but friction. Because while we're all being the same, the people above us are saying, ha, I got you. Now because you're all the same, I can tell you what being the same is, right? To that note, right, there's a very concerning thing that's bubbling in the nation as well, which some people have clocked and some haven't, right? But it's like the rebranding of racism in a very insidious way.
This is Aaron Watkins, a former tax worker. We confronted him after I recorded him making extremely racist and violent comments.
We put them all in accounts until they agree to leave, and if they refuse, we shoot them.
I came into contact with him as I spent over a year undercover investigating the far right.
We do not willingly live amongst these savage invaders.
Mr. Watkins is a member of a group called Patriotic Alternative, or PA. They say they aim to raise awareness of immigration and promote traditional family values, but what I found was far more sinister.
So I'm a white totalitarianist. I'm not a supremacist or nationalist. I'm a white totalitarianist. I believe a world where whites become the default human race. All other races are extinct except for whites.
We found PA members included an ex-nurse, a civil servant, and even a former teacher.
Because the only way to get rid of them will be to kill every single one of them. And we will have to have hearts of steel to do that.
One top lawyer suggests some members of the group may have committed crimes.
From what I've seen, and of course I'm just one lawyer, but I would consider that there's more than enough evidence here for the police to investigate and refer to the Crown Prosecution Service.
PA's leader, Mark Collett, said the comments I recorded were made in private and that his group didn't advocate violence or terrorism and denied it was an extremist organisation.
This, I might be completely wrong about this. Drop a comment if I'm wrong and you know the real reason. I would love to know. But the analysis of it is this, right? More and more you're seeing white heterosexual men, well, we don't really know what their sexuality is, in all honesty. How would you know? How would you know, right? I'm joking. But we're seeing more and more this idea of them driving around in vans, in cars with a white balaclava over a seat, right? So you know the seat head, right? Your passenger seat. Some people used to put an anonymous mask, you know, the guy from V for Vendetta. But it's becoming more and more prevalent that you see in these white balaclavas. Now, not being conspiracy theory-ish or anything, right? But it's giving the subtle feeling of Klansmanism.
Don't get why loads of men these days have got white balaclavas on the seat headrests in their cars, in their vans. What is that about? Are you in a gang? Why? Where are you buying them from?
Do not understand, and for me it gives massive small dick energy. If I ever went on a date with a guy and got into his car and he had balaclava things on his headrest, or even worse, sometimes they're like masks and stuff, like that anonymous mask, I'm just like, I'm getting back in the house. Blah. Nobody just owns a balaclava unless you are ski champion or, a bank robber. You've gone out of your way to go to the shop or Amazon on Prime and get one. You've gone out of your way to get one just to put it over your car seat. For what reason? What are you trying to prove apart from that you're a massive bellend? If you're doing it, stop. If your boyfriend does it, dump him.
Why the symbology? Why the lack of explanation? Why, when even white women raise this concern, what is this about? In the comments they're told to shut up, mind your own business kind of thing, right? What is that, right? Anyways, that's another matter all to the side. But personally, I choose not to steep myself in racism and be upset and irate about these things because it is a very energy draining thing when it's easier to just educate yourself on the reasons why people do these things and the human nature of it. But even myself recently had a very racist encounter in a shop in my local area. It's like, bro, like, I'm a member of this society. I've lived in this place for a long time, right? I've never seen you here before, but you've got a problem with me, right? I come into a shop, face not covered, just like you can see me right now. I walk in, I usually do it as well. I acknowledge the security guards, right? Because I used to do security as well. So it's like, I'm acknowledging you as a person, right? The normal guys, nod to them, right, yeah, go and get my shop in, and I'm gone, right? This guy, right? And again, I don't want to make it into a racy kind of thing, but a Romanian guy, white guy, right? I nod to him, right? And he gives me a weird look. So I'm like, whoa, what's your problem? Like, I'm just acknowledging your humanity, but I've come in there to get one item and one item only, right? So I'm walking and I notice this guy is following me up a whole aisle in Tesco's, right? Up the whole central aisle, right? I go to grab the item and then I turn over my shoulder and he's standing there at the top of the aisle watching me, right? So being the type of person I am, I decided to walk up to him and say, are you right? Is everything all right, right? I noticed that you're following me. And he's like, like, no, I'm sorry, that kind of thing. I'm like, look, would you like to follow me to the till too, right? And it's like, yeah, because you had this preconceived notion of who I am and where I am. And it's like, bro, you are as much a stranger, right? And a potential threat to the actual people of this country as I am, right? But the thing is, because of my skin colour, you perceive me as lower than you, which goes back into this whole idea of racism and patriarchy and classism, right? How patriarchy makes weaker men weaker, right? They need to be able to put themselves above someone else, right? Even without knowing the real context of their situation, right? So it's very deep, and that goes on to give us a knock-on effect in our day-to-day interactions with other people. It's insidious.
Racial trauma isn't just personal, it's systemic. Britain built itself on racism, and we inherited the fallout. Every time a black child gets unfairly punished at school, every time we get followed in a shop, every time another black mother buries her son because the police fear for their lives, that's racial trauma. Not a one-off, a pattern, a system that grinds us down and calls it just the way things are. And if you think I'm reaching, study after study shows black Brits suffer higher stress, worse mental health conditions, and way shorter life expectancy. Because the bottom line is, racism kills. Oxford researchers even found that racism rewires the brain, rewires it, creating PTSD-like symptoms. This is where knowledge becomes power, because they want us confused. They want us exhausted. But when you understand the roots of racial trauma, you see the game for what it is. So what now? We learn, we heal, we fight back.
Like, so much things keep happening around race. I speak up about certain things and then people come out calling me a tree swinger just because I said I don't feel comfortable living in a country where people are picking me apart all the time when I'm just trying to exist. And people told me, well, you just haven't assimilated enough. Huh? Like, how about you mind your business enough and don't ask me questions that has nothing to do with you? How I present, what I look like, what I do, how my hair grows out of my head is nobody else's business. It's not appropriate. And people will say, because they're not calling you the N-word with the hard ER at the end, or they're not calling you a monkey or a tree swinger, then it's okay for them to analyze you and look at you like, ooh, this shiny thing. How do you do that with yourself? Like, leave me alone. I don't want to be of the belief that I can't be friends with, or I can't have community with, or I can't just get along with people of any other race. But it's like everywhere I turn, people keep doing things that's just not okay and appropriate, and I'm supposed to laugh about it, or I'm supposed to teach people things. It's so draining, it's so tiring. And this is why when I said what I said earlier in the year about how I felt about living in England, and loads of people came out giving me their racism and just get over it. How do you get over something that continues to happen all the time? How do you get over something that is happening to you all the time when you're minding your business, giving money to people, you're going into a shop to give people your money, you're giving people your time and your energy and conversation, you're investing in friendships, you're spending time with people, you're letting them into your house, you're going into their house, you're giving them presents and gifts and money and all of your energy and time only for them to show you, oh, I only see you as an object. Oh, I only see you as something that I can sit here and critique. Oh, I don't actually see you as human. Let me pick you apart because I don't feel like you're like me, and we're supposed to just get over that.
You want to know what racism looks like in the UK? It's not always someone yelling racial slurs in the street. It's quieter, more polite, but more dangerous. So when I'm saying white people need to be accountable, it's not about blame. It's about being responsible, because benefiting from a system that causes harm and not saying anything is being complicit. And staying silent just keeps it standing.
All that to say, When you mix this religious extremism, this discrimination, xenophobia, sexism, all of these things into a pot and you never address them, you try to ignore them away like they don't exist, right? You're heading down a dark road, right? And people, it boils more and more and more to the surface, to where you find people are frustrated about things that have nothing to do with what the issue is, right? And they can't deal with one issue without whataboutism or bringing in this or bringing in that, right? And that's a problem. That could potentially lead to this greater divide that people are seeing on the ground. This idea that people want a civil war, but the problem is there's no clear defined enemy. There's no this party versus that party, this country versus that country. Some people want to see it as this race versus that race, but the problem is you can't get all the races to agree on it, right? You can't get the black people to agree to be against the white people. You can't get the Asian people to agree to be against the white people, right? So what are you left with? Ideology clashes, right? That's why the religious extremism and xenophobia kind of thing is rife at the minute, right? And it's concerning because it's becoming a more of a neo-clanism kind of bullshit on the ground, right? When it doesn't need to be that, right? We've interacted with each other for long enough to know that not every person that looks like this is like that, right? We take these reductionist views of peoples and cultures whenever we have a bad interaction with one, right? And it's like, why shouldn't I think you're all like this? Because this happened, right? And the reason we do that is because of all of the other pressure that is constantly on us about all these other unaddressed issues, right? So the minute one thing goes awry, the last straw, so to speak, everybody's on the get it list, right? And it's not really like that. And that's why that view of us as a country is kind of like, there's no racism if you're a tourist, but if you stay a day too long, you might see some things that make you go, kind of thing. All right, but anyways.
Bad vibes in the UK means that people who are actually doing well with their lives, who have achievements, who are making waves, constantly made to feel like they need to be humble, they need to be silent, they need to downplay their achievements, which I actually think is wrong and incorrect. Is this a UK thing? Because I've seen so many videos on TikTok of people being like, the UK is bad vibes, people are haters, people are jealous. And I'll tell you from my personal experience, like I have definitely felt like sometimes if I talk about my achievements, I just feel like very uncomfortable. I feel as though like people might see it as boasting or people might see it as showing off when that's actually not the case. I'm just talking about what I've done. I've seen people make comments like I'll say something and then they twist it into something that it's not. And I think for the most part, we can all just agree that like if you're doing well in the UK, the support system is really not there.
People in this country can't use their own brain cells to decide whether they like stuff or not. They have to go and be like, okay, who's liking it? Who's liking it? And if the majority like it, then I like it. You're weird. You're weird. You're sheep.
This guy's looking at it and he's like, oh my God. He says, is that a paint job on it? I said, that's it, it's wraps, you know, we work with the boys, they do all the stuff in the cars, blah, blah, blah. He's looking around, doesn't even say anything back to me, just walks around the car like he's a MOT inspector, having a look at everything. And as I'm getting back into the car, all of a sudden, as he's walking off, he's like, oh, there is a big nasty dent in your wheel though, isn't there? That just sums up how miserable the UK is. Like, they'll see you with something amazing, but there's a little pinhole here I can pinch. There's a little flaw here I can pick. It's not perfect. Ha, you can't enjoy that now, you can't be happy. You, how about that?
So we have a very much a crab in a bucket mentality in England, right? And this is across all races, across all classes, right? And again, you got to wonder who benefits the most from this. The deep thing is this: anybody that offers any kind of alternative life, alternative view, or entertainment of a sort on any social media platform is often plagued by commenters that say, what do you do for a living? What's your job? Do you have a job? Just put the fries in the bag, bro, right? The irony is, it's like a projection of their own feeling of where they are in society as a person, right? It's like, no, I can't do that, so you can't do that, you know? And that's a problem. So why I call it the unemploymentism is that it's like going back to the idea of the British dream, right? The British dream isn't to come into the country and just become a millionaire, like if you got to do it like Scarface or if you're going to do it like Bush, right? Whatever, right? However you decide to do it. The English dream ain't like that. It's being able to plug yourself into a system that oppresses you, right? And maintain your status. It's like you'll be like Atlas trying to hold up the world, right? And at the same time trying to push people down not to come up to where Atlas is, kind of thing, right? That is the reality of Britain, right? And it's raw. Like I can't even describe it, right?
It goes back to the French philosopher Rancière, who wrote that the central division across time, no pun intended, amidst social hierarchies is never simply about wealth or power. Instead, it's about time between those who have time and those who do not. And you go back to the earliest factories, and workers weren't allowed to have wristwatches because it would mean that they could tell the time. Think about the fact that the 8-hour workday was designed so that workers could be working in 3 shifts continuously throughout 24 hours. The powerful, therefore, not only control their own time, are able to work on their own companies and spend time with family and make money that is totally detached from the value of actual production, but it is also precisely the way in which workers do not have control over their own time. That if you are relatively affluent, it means that you have a lot of leisure time to do exactly what you want to do, to work harder and more efficiently. Whereas when you are relatively poor, it means that you cannot master or have control over your own schedule. It means that you have to work preordained shifts. It means that you might have to work multiple jobs. That therefore, time is the most important indicator of your relative worth, and also thereby of the relative chance of you ascending the social ladder of hierarchy. Time is more important than money or power. Time and the division between those who have it and those who do not is the central indicator of societal status.
And that comes with the job market being a savage, cutthroat place to be. If you can even obtain the job, you'll find you're amongst some like radical individualism, right? People that don't give a good goddamn about humanity at all. As long as they get what they want, how they get it, they will throw you under the bus and smile as they do it, right? And I've encountered it in the workplace a lot.
Like, as in reasons to be let go for coming back off break 1 minute late. 1 minute late, and I wasn't even late. Like, she said, it's her word against mine. And I was with my friend. My friend isn't getting fired. This job economy that we're at right now, it's so hard to find a job. It was so difficult. It was so difficult to find this one already. And here we are again, round 2.
The job market is very ghetto right now. It is very, very trash. If you have a job and you don't like it, oh well, go to your job. We do not care, okay? Hold on to your job until you get other options. Never, ever, ever leave a job without having options. And if you want to leave your job and you have no job options, that's fine. Make sure that you have the bank balance to support you until you have another option, okay? You do not like your manager, we do not care. You do not like your colleagues, we do not care. You do not go to work to make friends, lesson 101, all right? You go to work to earn a wage to get paid to pay your bills, okay?
The people trying to exasperate this you should get a job kind of thing, right, are forgetting that not everybody that doesn't have a traditional job is on the benefit system, right? People forget that, right? Some people work really hard, save their money, and then have time away from work. But that aside, right, even now in England, we're seeing a rise of job fraud, right? People that post jobs, right, on places like Indeed, places like Total Jobs, anyone you can name, right, LinkedIn, solely to steal your information and identity, right? So it's not only was it hard to get a job already, now you got to watch out for yourself getting put into the ground when you're already at the ground floor. You know, they're trying to put you 6 feet under while you're at the ground floor. Bro, I'm trying to get a job and you're trying to steal the money I don't even have yet, right? That is the reality on ground. That's how crab in a bucket Britain has become, right?
The first job scam I would like to share with you guys is fake job offers. Now for this one, scammers will post fake job listings on legit job boards like Indeed or LinkedIn, or they would even send you unsolicited emails. These job offers often promise high salary for minimal work. Once you show interest, they might ask you to pay upfront fees for training, background check or equipment, only for you to discover that the job does not exist immediately after you make this payment. Now I read an article on BBC about scammers pretending to be 2i recruits and Nolan recruitment. These scammers actually use the name of this legit recruitment agency and even the names of actual employees working in the company to deceive job seekers, which causes distress and financial loss for many of their victims, including an 18-year-old who lost nearly £3,000. The second is phishing scams. For these scams, scammers will send fraudulent emails that appears to be from reputable companies. The email often asks for personal information, or it will direct you to a fake website that would even look legit, where it will treat you to enter sensitive data such as your password, bank details, national insurance number, just to steal your information.
In the job market itself, right, depending on what skill, if you have a skill or if you're just like, you know, no, not to you, but like menial, typical labor kind of job, right? You're in the market against at least 3 generations of people, right? And that's older people. Let's just say you're in the market against millennials, Gen Xers, and even in some instances, boomers, right? So let's say 4. You're even in competition with certain Gen Alphas, right? Depending on what field you're in.
I applied for a weekend job. I'm not going to name the shop, but it was just stacking some shelves, and the application process was ridiculous. So you had to do 2 assessments. One was like the equivalent of a personality test that took like half an hour to do, and the other one was some sort of situational test in which quite a few of the answers were quite similar anyway. And then that doesn't even get onto the application form, in which you have to write almost the equivalent of War and Peace. I mean, I got ChatGPT to do it because it would have taken me over an hour to do. Like, if it's a skilled role, I get that, but stacking some shelves and you're requiring all that should just be your CV. Not being snobby, but I have a degree in business, right? I've been studying business at university. I can teach you all about investing and cyclical trading, dip trading. I can teach you about the macroeconomic policy and where the price of Bitcoin is going. Yeah, no problem. But I can't do that. Like, even that, and it's not even just me. I know like career professionals, PhDs, and my friend's mother's even a lawyer, my uni friend's mother, and even she struggles. Apparently she can't get in either.
So I have so many people trying to get through the door of this opportunity that it means like you've seen a rise of like AI use in applications and shit like that. Job tricks being like showed on TikTok and stuff like that. So it's the job market is absolutely F for one, right?
So this research came out a little while ago now, but yeah, Britons no longer believe working hard will provide a better life. That only 39% thinks if you work hard, you'll get a good life. So first of all, it's an idea of meritocracy. The idea if you work hard, you'll get a good life. And I don't think we have a full meritocracy in the UK. Of course, there are people that work incredibly hard in their life and actually they don't earn a lot of money. Or sometimes, let's be honest, we know people that are quite lazy and they do very well. I also think, things like the cost of living crisis, wages aren't keeping up with inflation, all those kind of things really affects people's opinion on this. The director of the Policy Institute couldn't have said it better, to be honest. Millennials have become much more sceptical about prioritising work as they made their way through their career because of the long-term economic and wage stagnation that will lead to younger generations to question the value of work. But to kind of almost counteract that point, UK citizens in terms of this data rank very low in the importance that they place on work, and is this a reason why we're not succeeding as well? I mean, if you look at the top countries, you can see there, but then we start to get into comparative countries. Look, you've got France, fine, you've got Norway, you've got Germany coming down, Japan, US, and look right at the bottom, the UK. So is that another element that people aren't valuing work enough, so they're not applying themselves?
The Bank of England says that the UK productivity situation is even worse than we previously thought. UK productivity is falling quickly and they don't fully understand why. One user says, there's no point in working harder in this country because you'll be taxed through your teeth for doing so. If you didn't know, UK productivity has never recovered since the 2008 financial crisis. And if you're wondering why that is, fantastic question because nobody knows.
Your generation have got 2 and 3 jobs. We never had 2 and 3 jobs, we had 1 job. Now everybody works 0 hours contracts and that never existed when we were young. People now have to do a job in the morning and they work from home in the afternoon and then they go and work for like Subway or whatever on an evening just to start trying to make money to buy a house. People turn around and go, oh, we worked harder then. I didn't have 3 jobs. I wouldn't have handled 3 jobs, you know what I mean? I wouldn't want to be young now because I had it easier then and I really worry about my kids, I really do. I mean, they're 21 and 25. By the time I was 25, I'd had a brand new car. I know it was an Austin Metro, but never mind.
The irony is, the government's like, oh, we're going to create more jobs, right? But the government doesn't create jobs. It's people in the private sector that create jobs, right? So if you don't allow people in the private sector to spurg off and do creative ventures and try to start businesses, you don't get more jobs. The government doesn't make more jobs, right? It's us, the citizens of the countries that create jobs, right? So if everyone wants you to be in a job, right, who's going to start a business to give you an opportunity to get a job, right? These are things people aren't seeing on the ground, which is further leading to this exasperation of, oh, the hangers-on and the users are rinsing the system while we're ignoring all of this fucking big-time abuse of power and money funneling and fuckeries that's happening, right?
Universal credit isn't designed to help you, and it's not going to get you where you want to be in life. A lot of people don't really understand universal credit. There are a lot of people that don't get universal credit and think that everyone who does get universal credit is a benefit scrounger and absolutely leeches from the economy. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And they think that people that are on universal credit are absolutely millionaires, living this lavish lifestyle because they're claiming benefits and they don't have to go to work, so they're getting the best of both worlds. When in reality, it couldn't be further from the truth. People are getting universal credit top-ups purely to get through the month. These people aren't living lavish lives, they're not driving crazy cars. They are just simply getting by. Inflation is so rampant right now that people are really struggling to just get through the month. And from all the stories I hear on here, on all the videos I post about universal credit, you can see in the comments that people aren't living lavishly. And there's some people out there that actually don't want to be on universal credit. They want to be doing things off their own back and supporting themselves, which I think is honourable. But the real mastermind behind universal credit is the fact that it allows businesses to pay their employees very, very little. And I don't think that's spoken about enough. Employers are getting away with paying their staff very, very little because they know universal credit and the government will step in and top up their salaries, therefore taking the liability off the employer and onto the government. And us taxpayers are basically subsidising that. So I believe the whole thing is a massive pyramid scheme. And whilst most people are caught arguing over is benefits right, is benefits wrong, and scroungers and benefit leeches, the real gangsters are the businesses and the governments that are getting away with allowing these people to pay their staff so little.
The most soul-crushing things about being unemployed and on universal credit is having to go to the job centre every week just to say the same thing, that I'm getting absolutely nowhere in the job search and that there's no interviews or nothing is happening, it's just rejection emails. Having to reiterate that every single week to them. I'm like, what if they think I'm not trying? I literally am. I am applying to jobs every single day and getting absolutely nowhere. And it just sucks. Just in this endless cycle of applying to jobs and getting rejected and just being stuck at home. I'm going insane being stuck at home. I hate it.
We'll do anything, right, but accept the inequality and address the classism, right? We'll kill each other to stay middle class but never look a bit up, right? Or we'll kill each other to stay poor working class but never look a bit up, right? It's very insidious, right? And again, do you blame the people or do you blame the history being replayed on the people time and time again, right?
On June 13th in 1381, peasants, fed up with harsh taxes and social inequality, marched into London, led by the fearless Wat Tyler. The peasants' revolt was fueled by years of economic hardship and political tension. Their grievances were clear: end the poll tax, reduce rents, and eliminate serfdom. Though the revolt was eventually quashed, it sent a powerful message. The uprising highlighted the deep social and economic rifts and set the stage for future demands for reform.
England, at the time, have loads of monasteries.
Yes.
They were just ripe for the picking.
We were such idiots because we didn't even comprehend the fact that anyone could come over here and take our nice shiny gold. We were like, no way, everyone's Christian, everyone's a respectable person, no one's going to touch anything. So
you're going to kill me?
You're going to kill me? Oh, priest! The church would essentially garner all this wealth and just keep in monasteries without any guards. It was so brainwashed that everyone was, all these peasants that had absolutely nothing. We're like, oh, look, that church over there, it's got all our nice shiny gold. They're like, but we love them so much, they pay for our bills. And then that church, they're just literally feeding off these poor peasants.
I know shirt on our back, but we sure will give our next 2 pennies to the church.
Yeah, the church's like, oh, that's a nice brooch. That's been in my family for 3 generations.
Whistle it now.
Wait, I think we'll take that. In the name of Christ. All right, you twisted my arm as far as it will go.
Health equals wealth. But as a society, we are broke.
If you're doing a check on the NHS right now, what state do you think it's in?
To give the NHS or the patient if they're in a critical condition.
Do H1. We used to talk about winter pressures in the NHS, and now winter is a 12-month period.
Ambulance response targets in England are consistently being missed. In January, the average time for heart attack symptoms was 40 minutes, more than double the target of 18, as patients struggle to get into A&E departments. The number of patients attending A&E is up 25% in 5 years.
Now, if you don't know, I do live streams every now and again on the YouTube channel you're watching and on TikTok. And I cover various topics and I like to ask people questions. Some of the topics that we've covered concern, in quotations, public health, right? Should we ban tobacco and vapes? Should we ban alcohol? Should we ban junk food, right? And what comes up time and time again is how unaware people actually are of the statistics, one, and their own life, right? You get a lot of people arguing on the behalf of private industry and having no stake in it at all, right? A lot of people have been indoctrinated with this mindset to put profit over public health, right? And it doesn't make sense. If they cared about the economic setting of our country, they'd realise things like the tobacco industry, the alcohol industry, and fast food / junk industry puts a way bigger toll on our financial budget as a country than what we gain by taxing these products in the first place, right?
Shorter, fatter and sicker. That's the damning verdict on children in the UK today. It's been put down to ultra-processed food and poverty, with the average height of 5-year-olds falling and the number of children diagnosed with type 2 diabetes rising by 20%.
Did you know that more than 42 million UK adults will be overweight or obese by the end of 2040? This despicable show of sugary shit is one of the reasons why. Stay away from these aisles. By the way, this was all in one shop, can you believe? Unbelievable.
The irony of this country to say, oh, look at us. We're in an obesity crisis. When you were doing Eat Out to Help Out, you didn't remember that you were in an obesity crisis. But as soon as people now need to use the resources, the very little resources that you get from the NHS, all of a sudden you need to make cutbacks. All of a sudden, it's costing you too much. When you were going into the pockets of the people that are dependent on the NHS, which is the working class, lower middle class, now you want to give us the statistics that, oh, we're spending upwards of £6.5 billion a year just to manage the obesity crisis.
And that same crab in a bucket mentality, that toxicity of just let people do what they want to do, they think it's an affront to their rights when you say, hey, it might be better if we take this poison off the market, right? They think it's my right to poison myself. And not only is it my right to poison myself, it's my right to poison my neighbor and poison my kid. Do you know why? Because we're parts of communities. We're in close proximity to each other. But everyone has this, not even, like, don't get me wrong, I don't see a problem with being yourself, but the idea of rugged individualism in the context of the detriment to society is rife, right?
Now, it's not for me to tell you that smoking is good, but it is for me to tell you that government should get the hell out, let us make our own decisions in our own lives. We've got a much bigger problem with drugs than we'll ever have with cigarettes.
If you're part of the dwindling population that still smoke, I really have to ask you why. Recent findings have revealed a significant increase in cancer cases caused by smoking, now reaching 160 new diagnoses every single day, according to Cancer Research UK. So, since 2003, cancer cases linked to smoking has surged by 17% in the UK, the most notable being that amongst liver, kidney and throat cancers, which have more than doubled in the past 2 decades. For example, liver cancer cases connected to smoking in 2003 were about 711, and last year sat about 1,600. So, despite a decrease in overall smoking rates, the UK's growing population means that still about 6.4 million people continue to smoke, and this continued prevalence contributes to the rising number of cancer cases. In addition, new research includes breast cancer amongst those influenced by smoking, with an estimated 2,200 cases every year in the UK. Overall, smoking is responsible for causing 16 different types of cancers, including around 33,000 cases of lung cancer every year. So Cancer Research UK is urging the government to reintroduce the tobacco and vapes bill during the upcoming King's Speech. And this bill, which would essentially prohibit selling tobacco products to anyone born after January 2009, was previously shelved, but as you can imagine, they are calling for it to be expeditiously unshelved. Smoking has so many seen and unseen harm to, many people. Passive smoking, children, asthma, allergies, etc. It's awful. So the urgency of this measure is, can't be understated. Smoking-related cancer diagnosis affects 6 people every hour in the UK. And as a really harmful consumer product, it should be eradicated to prevent future health crises. Let's be honest. I mean, I would love to see a smoke-free future, which will not only save lives, but also reduce the burden on the NHS, because quite frankly, the NHS is crumbling, just alone at the cancer care, diagnosis, treatments, and everything else that is required for our growing population. So, in conclusion, the increase in smoking-related cancer cases underscores the need for urgent public health interventions and a robust strategy nationally to manage and mitigate the impact of cancer in the UK.
To be honest, I would ban alcohol for good. A lot of people comment back to me and say, yeah, you know, not everybody struggles with it. We should be able to have a good time, to have a switch off. But for me, I say it's only 10% of people it doesn't have a negative effect on. So many people are admitted alcoholics, but then I bump into see so many people who pretend they're not alcoholics, but you speak to them, it's like the only way to switch off is by having a drink. I need to have a drink to switch off. That means you're a fucking addict. Then there's also a percentage of people who just have it on the weekends, but they become an absolute mess, make stupid decisions, start acting stupid, it causes them problems throughout the rest of the week. So I'd probably say there's 10% of people who it actually doesn't fully affect. And what's the point of having so much on the streets that kills people and ruins so many fucking lives just because that 10% of people it doesn't affect, when them people will probably just have just as much of a good time without alcohol being around? I just fucking ban the thing.
You tell a person, hey, these psychoactive drugs you're taking are damaging your biological body, your mind, and therefore your ability to make rational decisions. I don't care, it's my right to kill myself. Should we legalize that? They're like, yeah, we want it legalized, right? But we don't want to be criminalized, we don't want to be penalized. But hey, your decisions are going on to affect other people, right? You say the same thing to them about alcohol. Do you know how much it costs the NHS every year because of alcoholism or because of tobacco, right? Don't care. It's my right to kill myself. And these are the things that keep us in that low vibration as a society. And I'm not a woo-woo guy when I say low vibration. I literally just mean keep us sick, right? And if our bodies are sick, our minds are sick. Therefore, we can't think rationally. We can't make good decisions. So we kill ourselves before we get a chance to actually live. That's all I'm saying. So if health is wealth, why are we so broke?
The more I looked into it, the more it hit me. This isn't just a health issue, it's a health inequality. Let me break it down a bit. So first, the numbers. They don't lie. The NHS says that Black, African and Caribbean adults are 2 to 3 times more likely to get type 2 diabetes than white British adults. That's not just a coincidence, that's not random. It's because we're more exposed to the risk and we're not being protected adequately by the system. And why is that? Well, most of the prevention stuff out there, it wasn't even made with us in mind. You see, we're barely in the research, we're not the focus of most health campaigns, and a lot of outreach just doesn't reach us. So yeah, the risk it builds quietly, and we don't even know it's happening. The real issue isn't just that we're at risk, is that we're not included in the safety net that's supposed to catch it early. We're not just dealing with diet, we're surviving systems. See, it's not poor choices, it's poor conditions. And when stress becomes normal, so does risk. You see, even when we try to get help, sometimes it feels like the help just misses us. You see, research shows that Black patients are less likely to be offered diabetes education and more likely to be diagnosed late. You see, there's so much going on there. You got bias, cultural differences, people not feeling seen or heard. And by the time that care actually comes, well, sometimes it's just too late. But here's the thing, we're not stuck. See, the more that we understand why this is happening, the more power we have to do something about it.
All this to say, Britain is cooked, but there is still hope. You just gotta pick your battles, pick and choose your battles, and not get swayed by the media rampages and storms. Remember, everything you see on the news is already gone through a filter and it's been lobbied by a certain group of people to show you this and not that, show you this side and not this side, right? So once you separate from that kind of thing, even social media too, right? You're a slave to your algorithm. So the minute you make your account, you should decide what you want to see and what you don't want to see, right?
Echo chamber or filter bubble is where you only see content that you already agree with. This may be because you only follow the same types of account, get your news from one source, or your algorithm mainly feeds you the same type of content. This can mean you only see one side of a story and don't get the full picture, making it harder to see and understand other people's perspectives.
Your For You page is an algorithm. It is quite literally designed to give you what you interact with. And there are systemic issues in which people are getting, boosted to the top and you feel frustrated, but you are the boss of the whole operation. If you actually want to support someone and see them rise and you want to see their growth and development, you need to invest in that. And that takes effort.
We can maintain a certain level of social cohesion, right? Or social engineering amongst ourselves by simply saying to ourselves, how can I keep my corner of the world clean, right? What is actually a real issue that affects me? Not an issue I've been told to worry about today by the news and the radio. Something actually on the ground. I'm no kind of activist. I don't know shit about politics, as I said in the beginning of this. But consider where you stand in your own life, right? Where can you start and do something cool, or just lend a hand by, if not actually a physical hand, a psychological hand, right? The loneliness epidemic in the country is killing lots of people, right? Mental health. Like, I was reading some statistics the other day about men and women that served in the military and armed forces in England. Between 1996 and 2018, there's over 1,000, I think around 60-ish suicides, right? So they're people that have been around people. Now imagine all the people that haven't been around anybody, right? So whatever you can do to offer some, some improvement, go forth and do it. I know it's been a while since I made a video, right? And this isn't the usual type of videos that I make, right? But because of my interactions with the public as of the last couple of months through live streams, it's become very obvious that something needs to be said. Now, although my thoughts weren't completely clear and my ideas weren't clearly defined, I don't want you to take this as just a rant. Like, you know, I may approach these subjects at different times in a different way, but I want you to just think about what I'm saying, right? I don't say anything I've said here to try and be divisive or discriminate against any groups of people. It's just things to consider, and all I've been able to do is just convey a little bit of what's been on my mind, right? Now consider what's on the mind of the general public, right? So that being said, think about what's been said here, and I'll leave you with this like I do on the live streams, right? We have evidence to suggest, as humans, we are capable of absolutely anything. So consider yourself one of those people. Given enough time and enough resources, there is literally nothing you cannot achieve. All you have to do is envision the final state of whatever goal you want to achieve, whatever it is you want to produce, be it product, service, idea, a language, whatever it is. See the final version of it, then reverse engineer it back into our reality, right? Again, we have evidence to suggest as humans we've done it. The very technology you're using right now to watch me and hear me was once considered impossible, but now it's a reality. So consider that, right? Society needs more thinkers, more inventors, and more good people. So do your part, right? Keep your corner clean.